All right, in regards to closed session, item 2A, information was shared in regards to labor negotiations with CSEA. Item 2B, information was shared in ongoing negotiations with SMEA. And item 2C has been tabled until after open session is completed. Let's go ahead and do the pledge.
Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice.
The calendar for upcoming events and meetings. December 9th is the first interim budget approval and annual audit report. December 16th will be the annual organizational meeting and followed by a regular meeting thereafter. Do we have any public comment, Mr. Ontiveros? As there are no public comments, I will not read item 4 out loud. Does anybody wish to approve the agenda as presented?
I will move to approve the agenda as presented.
I second. Oh,
I just want to add that you'll notice that the agenda before you is an amendment.
yeah.
We added item D, the selection date for the annual governing board organizational meeting. I neglected to include that item when we notified the county. We sent the county the notification. They send us the package every year. And so that was an addition just yesterday.
Okay.
Just to although we had previously designated that date as the organizational meeting.
Right.
Ed Code requires that at the regular board meeting prior to, it has to be designated as well.
Okay.
So I will move to approve the amended agenda as presented.
I second.
It's been moved by Ms. Cordero, seconded by Mrs. Flores, that the agenda be approved as amended. Roll call.
Mrs. Flores?
Here. Aye. I'm sorry.
Okay. Mr. Lara?
Aye.
Mrs. Cordero?
Aye.
Mr. Hollingshead?
Aye. And item 6, consent agenda.
I'll move the consent agenda.
I'll second.
It's been moved by Mr. Lar, seconded by Mrs. Cordero, that we approve the consent agenda as presented. All.
Mrs. Flores?
Aye.
Mr. Lara?
Aye.
Mrs. Cordero?
Aye.
Mr. Hollingshead?
Aye. Now moving on to item 7A, action item, resolution 20-07.
So before you is a resolution approving the absence of Mrs. Oliver from the last board meeting. I did speak with her last week. I appreciate you asking earlier, Mrs. Flores. This COVID situation has not been good on folks that are in care facilities. She's feeling fine, but the ability to get connected over the internet, she just, although we've been sending her the agenda, she's talked to her about questions. She's just, I told her, I said, we miss you at the meetings. And she said, I miss being at the meetings. That really has been a big part of her life for a long period of time. So she just wanted me to convey to all of you that she would much prefer to be able to be outside of her facility and here with us.
Yes. I don't know that this is an appropriate time, but we do need to recognize her years of service in some way.
We've got something in the works for the meeting on the 16th, right? I put Kristen on it. She's
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Help, Kristen. Okay, so I'll move to approve the adoption of resolution 20-07, approving the absence of board members from meetings of the Board of Education.
I'll second.
Moved by Mrs. Cordero, seconded by Mr. Lara, that we adopt resolution 20-07. Roll call, please.
Mrs. Flores?
Aye.
Mrs. Cordero?
Aye.
Mr. Lara?
Aye.
Mr. Hogshead?
Aye.
Oh, I'm sorry.
All right, so we'll move on to item 7B, SMBSD board policy update, and look at all those numbers.
Yes. So just to put this into context, if you remember when we went to the online agenda, it was about a year ago. Part of that transition, when Peggy Purdue Oswald was sitting in Kristen's seat, we were working through that annual maintenance process with CSBA. And so over the course of last year, we brought a number of new policies, adopted a number of new policies that were really an outcome of the transition to LCFF. I'm so grateful that Kristen stepped in when Peggy retired, but in the midst of that, the online transitioned to an entirely different platform. And so the workflow that Kristen assumed is different than what I would say Peggy and Kristen and I got trained, but really it was Peggy and Kristen. I didn't really get trained. I just kind of sat there. But the new platform is a lot more, it's a much more robust product. I'm looking at Kristen shaking her head because like I understand it, but it really has created the workflow. So, but on the backside, what I told Kristen, I said, don't worry about the policy stuff for now. Let's get the platform up and running. So these items that were attached to this, the policies and the exhibits and the administrative regulations that were attached were those that through that manual maintenance that CSBA did said are no longer necessary. And so as you had an opportunity to read through all those, there was a little rationale on the top of each one. This has been replaced by. And what this is going to enable us to do is clear out all those, because what we want to eventually have is all of our current policies accessible online. We had like 3 different binders that were 3 different versions. And so making that electronic transition, this is really the next big step.
Well, it was very interesting to look through them. And I was sat down anticipating a very long afternoon. And once I kind of got started, kind of got the gist, and it went by much more quickly.
Yeah, and total credit to Peggy and Kristen for setting that system up. They really created that large spreadsheet that kind of has them all in their different phases. I mean, it was simple enough that I could understand it.
So I will make a motion to approve the deletion of outdated board policies, administrative regulations, and exhibits as presented. I can speak.
So I second it.
Been moved by Mrs. Cordero and seconded by Mrs. Flores that the Board of Education approve the deletion of the outdated board policies, administrative regulations, and exhibits. Roll call.
Mrs. Flores?
Aye.
Mr. Lara?
Aye.
Mrs. Cordero?
Aye.
Mr. Hogshead?
Aye. And we'll move on to 7C, Resolution 20-08, Annual and 5-Year Development Fee Reports for 2019-2020 fiscal.
Good evening, Board. I'll be going over the developer fee reporting for 2019-20. All right. So The purpose of the reporting is to discuss the annual reporting of fees collected, show 5-year findings where we look at anticipated uses for next year and then 5 years out, and to demonstrate that facility needs exceed fees collected to date and must continue to be collected. Fees collected in 1920. Well, the rates were for residential construction $5.50 per foot. The mitigation areas were subject to an additional $1, and commercial construction was 42 cents. We did collect $2,368,788 in developer fees. We also earned over $143,000 of interest. Projects using developer fees in 1920, a little over $483,000 for the Bill Livin Elementary School, almost $47,000 for our relocatable classrooms, which are some leases on portable buildings, and then $98,000 for professional consulting and operations. That's indirect cost, and also School Works report, which is a school facility needs analysis that's due every year. Anticipated uses for 2021, a budget of about a little over $5.8 million. 5.7 of that is for the Bill Livin Elementary School, because we did have expenditures that we had to pay in for July and August of this year. Also temporary housing, $34,000, that's the portable leases, and then about $61,000 for the professional consulting and operating expenditures. So anticipated funding for 2021, we have interest of about $45,000, school facilities fees $210,000, mitigation payments $10,000. You add that to our beginning fund balance from July 1 of 9.4, so you get a total funds of a little over $9.7 million. And then for 2021, we have total costs for our projects of about 5.8. So we should have a remaining ending fund balance of a little over $3.9 million. So 5 year, we got to look out 5 years. So we have an estimated project cost of somewhere between 71 million and 92 million. That's made up of portable classrooms, finishing off some of the costs for the new school and a potential new property if that is needed. So what that shows is the need for facilities fees will continue. Project costs will consume all the fees that we do collect, and needs analysis will provide more details at a future date. So tonight we have described the anticipated uses for the current year and 5 years out, and that we can demonstrate that the facility needs far exceed the fees collected to date and must continue. So with that, I can answer any questions.
Brian, are fees changing as far as square foot for property and for commercial? Or are they still hanging the same per square foot?
Currently, they are the same. They currently are the same. There was a change where if it's less than 500 square feet, then there's no developer fee.
Yeah.
That's required. Yeah. So that is a change right there. Yeah.
Yeah. And as far as on the portables leased, how many of those do we still have?
I think I can probably give you a good estimate. I think we have around 200. It might be around 210 portable buildings throughout the district. Most of them are owned outright. The amounts that we lease are a lot fewer. I want to say it's like five or six different items that we still lease. So it's a much smaller list that we lease.
Good. All right. Thank you.
The question you also asked, Mr. Lara, I want to provide some clarification on about the changing of the fees. This report is a compliance requirement in transparency to share with the community how we're using the fees.
Yeah.
There are other reports that we bring in the spring that provide the justification to increase fees if the conditions are right with the construction cost index and other factors to increase those fees. And that's a separate action item that comes in the spring each year for the level 2 fees and every other year for level 1 fees.
All right, perfect. Thank you. All right, no other questions. Yeah, I'll make the recommendation that the Board of Education adopt resolution number 20-08, annual and 5-year developer fee report for the 2019-20 fiscal year is presented.
And I'll second that.
Been moved by Mr. Lar and seconded by Mrs. Cordero that the board adopt resolution 20-08 annual and 5-year developer report for the 2019-20 fiscal year. Roll call.
Mrs. Flores? Aye. Mr. Lara?
Aye.
Mrs. Cordero?
Aye.
Mr. Hollinshead?
Aye. Motion passes. We'll move on to item 7D, the adoption of the organizational meeting date.
And so as I mentioned previously, when we adopted the agenda, we do designate in our reorganization meeting each year the next reorganizational meeting date. And so we had established December 16th as that date. But part of, again, the education code requires that at the meeting prior to that meeting that the board take formal action to adopt. So the recommendation here is that the board formally adopt the date of December 16th as the annual board organizational meeting. That will be held at 6 p.m. on December 16th, and then will immediately be followed by the regular board meeting that will be scheduled that evening.
Also, we'll make the motion to adopt the annual building board organization meeting scheduled for December 16th at 6 p.m.
I'll second. Oh, go ahead.
I'll second.
Been moved by Mr. Lara, seconded by Mrs. Cordero, that the annual Santa Maria Bonita School District organizational meeting be scheduled for December 16th at 6 p.m. Roll call.
Mrs. Flores?
Aye.
Mr. Lara?
Aye.
Mrs. Cordero?
Aye.
Mr. Hollinshead?
Aye.
I do have a question on our calendar. It shows a December 9th, the first interim budget approval and annual audit report. Is that going to be a separate meeting?
That will be a separate meeting, and you'll remember there was a change. The reason that reorganizational meeting date has changed because there was a change in the law. It used to be that the meeting needed to be held within, I want to say 15 days of December 2nd, had been in the law for a long time for the reorganizational meeting. It changed going into last year that it has to be within 15 days of, I believe it's the first Friday of December now. And so for us, that made the 16th the date. The first interim has to be presented prior to December 15th. So if you remember last year, we actually moved the date of our December meeting to meet the reorganizational requirement.
Yeah.
It didn't. I'm going to say this because Mr. Beecher's on mute. It didn't meet the budget requirement by the letter of the law, but the county said it would not have held up our budget because there's a whole other process that occurs. The only thing that was in risk was that if we didn't get it to the county by December 15th, that my paycheck would have been upheld, and Mr. Beecher didn't have a problem with that. And so we moved both of those meetings. But now, in addition to the first interim, the new LCFF requirement, the LCAP parent budget has to be approved prior to December 15th. So we'll bring that on the 9th as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I want to let me know that I'll be in Tulare all that day, and I won't be leaving there till about 4, so I'll be straight over here.
On which date?
The 9th, I've got a meeting that I got to be at.
So, but the beauty of Zoom, you can just phone in.
Pull over the freeway.
So thank you for asking that question, Mr. Cordero, because we used to be able to bookend those, and now that change put two different sets of requirements.
And I don't remember that from last month's agenda. making note that we would be having 2 meetings in December.
We actually adopted it last December. We adopted those dates because that's when the change went into effect. Yeah.
Too long between.
Amen. Yeah, there's only
Many
been,
other things have happened.
there's only been 10 years of COVID since.
I know.
Ricky, if you're worried about getting here, it is a budget meeting, so it's going to be over pretty quick, so you might not make it.
I can do it at the same time.
Yeah, that's all we need.
No,
Oh, yeah, you could listen to it.
I could listen to it myself. That's probably what I'm gonna do. But don't do it.
Yeah, so the reorganizational meeting on the 16th, the organizational meeting, we actually be when Mr. Valencia is sworn in.
Right.
So I appreciate Mr. Valencia, you sitting patiently through these meetings for the last several months until we get there, but it's coming soon.
The light is definitely.
Along with all the paperwork.
Yeah.
I was thinking about that because it will be exactly 4 years since my first knee surgery because he came to my house
That's right.
to do his hair and
Mhm.
I attended remotely.
You started it remote, Zooming way back when.
Shall we move on to item 8A, discussion item overview of baseline district assessment results for our team?
Thank you. So good evening, board members, superintendent, members of the public. Before I hand the presentation over, I just wanted to give really heartfelt thank you to our assessment and accountability team, AJ Winkler, Lori Grock, Michelle Sullivan, and Nicole Wiseman. They've been doing fantastic work, and I just wanted to make sure that, that I thank them on behalf of everyone. So we really appreciate the work they've been doing. So on that, I will hand it over to Nicole that will walk you through our data.
Trying to thank you for your patience as I just get my screen set up so I can see you all as well as my presentation. Oops. And already I've blown it. We watched a training where they talked about you shouldn't tell your audience what you're doing. I'm clearly not doing a great job of that. So good evening, board and Superintendent Ontiveros and Cabinet. Thank you for having us today. We are really excited to share our baseline data around our new district benchmark assessment. Our teachers, staff, students, and families rose to the challenge and have successfully navigated administering our LPAC initial summative, our optional summative LPAC, as well as the NWEA assessment remotely, and all of the challenges that come with implementing new initiatives. Collectively, we worked through the challenges of navigating these assessments remotely in order to determine the unfinished learning gaps from school closure and to be able to track our progress this year. This data will also serve as a progress monitoring tool for our state and federal funds. In our theory of action, key driver 4 is ensuring that we have an aligned instructional system, and a huge piece of making sure that we have aligned assessments. Our assessments inform what we teach and how we teach. So today we'll review our baseline data from our initial administration of the NWEA MAP growth assessment that we gave during the first 2 weeks of October. Due to questions that have surfaced, I'm going to share a quick overview of the scope of NWEA with the board. NWEA MAP growth has been around for 40 years, and it's administered on a large scale, 9,500 schools and districts across the world. Choosing NWEA MAP growth was intentionally done in alignment with our vision for student success and increasing outcomes for Santa Maria Bonita students, as it is an assessment that's administered and normed on such a large scale. As you can see, it's administered in 145 countries worldwide. This fall, 8,605,978 million students were tested, both in brick and mortar as well as remotely. Within California, 186 districts assessed this fall, and we had 13,788 unique students assessed here within our district. This assessment will provide us the opportunity to measure a student's growth from kindergarten all the way through 8th grade, aligned to the rigor of our California standards. We want accurate, valid, and reliable data that can provide valuable diagnostic information, especially to determine where to focus resources and how to best help students academically. NWA requires rigorous and systemic review of their test items using a number of organizations that publish stringent standards that help test makers eliminate bias and take a consistent approach to writing unbiased items. This ensures that the assessment provides test questions that are equally accessible to every student, regardless of cultural, socioeconomic, ethnic, and religious background. The growth measure within NWEA is provided using differential item functioning. This method includes a range of techniques that are used to evaluate evaluate how and whether different subgroups are responding differently to particular items within the scale. Bias and sensitivity reviews are done using and following standards set forth by the American Education Research Association, the American Psychological Association, and the National Council on Measurement in Education. Education loves those acronyms. So now that you have a little background on the scope of NWEA, we want to get down into the results. And so we want to start with the number of students assessed in the district by grade level and subject. And so this chart shows you that during fall of 2020, assessments were administered to all students in grade 1 through 8 in reading and math, grade 7 and 8 in science, and then students that are enrolled in the dual immersion program or newcomers were also administered the Spanish reading and the Spanish math. The typical average time to complete each assessment per subject in primary grades was approximately 30 minutes, and in upper grades, it was approximately 45 minutes. Looking at our overall district achievement, this graph will show you that the overall median achievement of district students is slightly below average at the 30th percentile. You'll see the red line that shows the national norm, and where we're aiming for is the 50th percentile. You can see that science was slightly above our district median at 36%, and math was below the district median at 28th percentile. However, you can see that our district is below average in relation to national norms. The next 3 slides will be providing information on how our students are doing by grade level in the 3 tested areas of reading, math, and science. A first look at this data would give us the perception that we're doing well and not too far behind the national norm. However, I want to remind you of the way this data is reported is different than other forms of data we are used to looking at. Let's take a moment and ground ourselves in how this data works. So when you look at this graph, the first thing you'll note is the chart demonstrates the differences between the SMBSD RIT, which is the blue, and the national normative data, which is the green, for the fall test administration in reading. You'll notice that SMBSD students begin first grade 2 points below the national norm, but by the end of 8th grade, they're 11 points below the norm. So what we notice right away is that on our watch, the gap is increasing. What does this mean? 11 points doesn't really seem that far off from the norm, but I want us to think back to the board study session in late October, and I want us to apply the learning of the RIT. And so we're going to look at 8th grade because that's where the biggest gap is. So the national average mean score for fall of 8th grade is 218. So that's the green line. Our 8th grade students are performing at an average mean RIT of 207. That's an 11-point gap. What we need to consider is that our 8th graders are performing at about where a 5th grader mid-year falls on the national average RIT band, which is 150 to 350. So the end of the year normed national mean RIT for an 8th grader is 230. So an 8th grader that's scoring at the 50th percentile in the fall needs to grow 12 points in order to stay on grade level. In order to be reading by grade level and the 50th percentile, our SMBSD 8th grade students will need to grow 22 points by the spring of 2020. What we know is that we have hardworking teachers, we have great students, and we have families that really are supporting their kids. But we also know by looking at this data that we still have work to do to ensure that our students are successful when they leave high school. You'll see that this data is exactly represented the same for math. This is showing that in the fall test administration in math, SMBSD students begin 1st grade 1 point above the national norm, but end 8th grade 12 points from the norm. So again, you see that the gap is increasing on our watch. Students in the 6th grade have the largest distance from the norm, lagging by 13 points. In this, you'll see science. Remembering that only our 7th and 8th grade students in SMBSD took the science assessment. 7th grade students scored 6 points below the national norm, while 8th grade students scored 7 points behind the norm. Although there's some big gaps here, just want to remind you that we just adopted science curriculum. And what we know is the more that we use our adopted curriculum, which is aligned with standards, the better our students will perform. So our expectation is that as we implement our science from kindergarten through 8th grade, we would expect to see jumps in student achievement here. Now we're going to look at the projected correlation of NWA scores to the spring 2020 state assessment, which for us is our SBAC assessment. NWA has a strong correlation to our state SBAC assessment, and this slide shows us that based on how students in grade 3 through 8 performed on the NWA assessment this past fall, this is where they're likely to fall when they take the SBAC assessment this spring. Just to remind you, in spring of 2019 was the last time we took our SBAC assessment. We had 34% of our students that met or exceeded the standard in ELA, and only 26% met or exceeded the standard in math on the state SBAC. And while we know and acknowledge all the challenges of taking this assessment remotely and distance learning, we acknowledge the projected COVID slide and unfinished learning from school closure. We're able to still see that our NWA baseline data is in alignment with our SBAC scores from spring 2019, and that our projection for this spring is far less than half of our students predicted to meet proficiency levels 3 or 4 on our spring assessment. Now that we've administered and we have these baseline results, what are our next steps? Well, our next steps are we've done some training with teachers at our last professional learning on goal setting with students, because we know that when you own your learning, you are more apt to do better. We are continuing ongoing professional learning for leaders and teachers. And we will administer this assessment again in February That's our winter administration, at which time we'll be able to come to you and share our growth data and a little bit more on how our students are doing as we progress through remote learning this year. And with that, I know that was a lot of information. Lori and AJ and I are here to answer any questions that you might have. Mrs. Cordero.
Yes. Nicole, do any of the results provide information specific enough to be utilized towards setting specific learning objectives for students? Or is this just a general score that shows they're above or below?
That is a great question, Mrs. Cordero. So the results are actually, what's really amazing about this assessment is that it does come down to the student level. It breaks it down by the strands and by standard. So you can receive information from the for each student on a tool that NWA provides called the Learning Continuum. And so that's a tool that tells you this is how a student is doing in relationship. This is what a student is, what you need to reinforce with the student, what the student is ready to learn, and where to go next with the student. So each student falls on the learning continuum, and this information supports a teacher with their instruction and knowing how they might scaffold up and help a student provide access to grade level curriculum.
Do you have any samples of what that would look like? I would just be curious to see, you know, what it looks like and to, you know, look at it myself.
We can get that information for you and for the Friday board packet. So we'll put together a little bit of information and some of the training that we're putting together for staff we'll get to you so that you can kind of dig in and get a little bit familiar with that. And then please know that our team is available to answer any of those questions as you dig in.
Thank you.
Mrs. Flores, I saw you come off.
Yeah,
I was going to ask if you'd please include the PowerPoint too, because I couldn't write fast enough. I just want to clarify a couple of things. So if you'd please include the PowerPoint you just shared with us, I'd appreciate it. And then the second question I had is, how has this been shown to teachers and staffs already? Have they had a chance to look at this?
So that's
The results?
This is hot off the presses.
Okay.
So the minute that a student, let me back up a little bit. The minute that a student submits their assessment, teachers have access to those reports immediately. So the teachers have access, administrators have access. Part of a new assessment is there's a little bit of a learning curve as there's a lot of different pieces to go in and learn. So this is our first public sharing of the data in essence. We'll be sharing this with leaders on December 1st with our instructional services team on Friday. And then from there, leaders are rolling that out with their staff and having conversations about what they're doing to support students and ensure growth.
And then it's going to be given again in February, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So we administer this, just so you know, Mrs. Flores and board, we administer this in the fall and the winter. And then in the spring, we administer the NWEA to K2. But our 3rd through 8th graders will take the SBAC as that's highly correlated and aligned to our NWEA, and we don't want to overtest our students.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you, Nicole and team. That was Fantastic. I'm glad to hear that some maybe, or at least seems that some of the concerns that folks had going into this, as far as the administration and whatnot, didn't seem to be overwhelming or maybe even occur at all. And it sounds really good formative information for our folks, and a step in the right direction. So thank you guys so much. So I'll acknowledge the overview baseline district assessment results as given to the board. And we'll move on to item 8B, overview of contract with tutor.com to support students and families with asynchronous learning.
So thank you, me again. Before we get started again, I just want to thank the Expanded Learning Department, Rob Bergen, Tina Duran, Eduardo Pantin, and team. Really having to rethink and reimagine, like everyone else, what does expanded learning look like in a distance learning model? And now we have some different needs for students, and really thinking about how do we support them in asynchronous learning? And we've received many feedback pieces from parents, from teachers, from staff, that there just needs to be additional support at all hours in all subject areas for our kids as best as possible. And so I just thank the team for really going out and finding out what are other people doing for this and finding something that could really work for our district. So I'm excited for you to hear about it. So with that, I'll hand it over to Rob Bergen.
Good evening. Set up my, I'm not sure if I'm sharing yet.
Not yet.
Can you see me now?
And hear you, yes.
All righty. So, good evening, board members and cabinet and Santa Maria Bonita School District staff. Tonight, I would like to bring forward the Expanded Learning Department's plan to address the challenge our students are facing with asynchronous learning in the distance learning environment as a discussion item for your consideration. We've been trying to come up with plans to mitigate learning loss, and we've also, using our aligned instructional system, expanded learning falls into this by using our strategy of providing additional learning opportunities after the school day for students who have significant learning gaps. It would be an understatement that our parents are concerned about their children's learning this year and have requested additional support. These needs include help with their asynchronous learning in the evening when the parent is home, help in Spanish for parents, educational continuity and equity of access, and social and emotional supports. After a search of several options and programs, tutor.com has been identified as a leading provider of student support that can meet the essential needs of Santa Maria Bonita students. It provides 24/7 one-to-one tutoring, both on demand and scheduled for fourth grades, which means a student can just sign on and they'll get somebody literally in seconds after they've been registered into the program. Or if they have a particular tutor that they really like, they can find their calendar and schedule times with them. This slide's already out of date. As of this morning, Spanish tutoring is now also available 24/7. It used to be from 8 a.m. to 11 in the core areas of science, math, and social studies. Site administrators are provided monthly generated reports depicting trends, usage, data, and student survey results. Also, students can connect with any device, including our Chromebooks and their parents' smartphones. There's 361 days a year of tutoring and technical support. They're only closed on Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's Day, and 4th of July. Not knowing a lot of kids that want to get tutoring those days though. Parents and students are able to log in to a client portal, and that allows them to access their student account information, which includes all their previous sessions. How it works is there's a direct connection with a qualified tutor within seconds. Again, schedule support is available. The session does not end until the student feels successful. The tutor doesn't have blocks of times where they just have to say, okay, your time's up, that's it. They have to mutually agree that they're ready to go. All sessions are recorded and available for students and parents to review later. These are also reviewed by tutor.com for the quality of the tutoring that's going on. Both student and tutor complete a post-session survey, and that's also used for ongoing quality control. And the unique thing is there's no cameras being used. Everything is seen through the work. Here's an example of the interactive whiteboard that the tutor and the student would communicate with each other on. So the student doesn't have any idea what the tutor looks like. The tutor doesn't have any idea what the student looks like. Everything's focused on the work. I believe you saw this document last week in the board memo. A couple of highlights are that this will work with our curriculum, bullet 2. We will be able to upload all our curriculum and benchmark and Clever, and the tutor will know exactly what our students are working on. It extends the learning day, bullet 5, when students need that help, when they're getting frustrated. And to also deal with the frustration, bullet 8, it builds confident learners. 96% of students responding to the post-session surveys have said that using tutor.com makes them feel more confident in their schoolwork. I believe that's probably a statistics from before COVID. And since we're in this has got to be even more of a positive for them. And it also provides equity of access at no cost to the students or the family. They just need to have that computer and an internet. In-person tutoring does more than support students academically. It provides emotional support by improving self-confidence. So our next steps are, provided you like what you're hearing, IT will upload the student information over the Thanksgiving break. An overview for administrators and coaches would be provided after Thanksgiving break, the week we get back. And then student and parent communications would be sent out once the implementation is complete. And our hope is that students would be able to access prior to the start of the winter break. Any questions?
So is the idea that every single student in the district would have access to this? Or, okay, 4th through 8th grade?
Yes, 4th through 8th grade.
At $35 an hour?
Yes, and it rounds up to the next minute. So I think for like a 20-minute session, it would be a little over $12.
And it would be, I monitored and reports sent monthly?
Yes, there's automatic generated reports, but if an administrator was so inclined, they could actually dig into it and get more specific information if they would like. But
And what about
the automatically generated ones on the usage, students, and that general information.
And would teachers know if their students were using tutor.com?
Teachers would have access to find out that information.
would they likewise have access to that recording of the whiteboard? Or, I mean, because I mean, it would seem like there would be definitely a some kind of a communication gap there if the tutor is working on something in a manner that's different than the 4th through 8th graders being instructed in their classroom, much like the same way if they were to go on Khan Academy and find a different way to do something or something like that. Is there a way for the teacher to look at that whiteboard or see what the work that's been done? Or
The recording of the tutoring session could probably be available to the teacher if they wanted to do that.
Was that, Rob, I was going to ask you earlier, it looked like there was a little chat line next to that. Is that strictly type, or is that voice?
There's option to have chat or voice. That's a choice.
Okay.
Also, if a teacher was inclined to want alerts, they can send alerts about students that are either having extendedly long tutoring sessions or they're having multiple tutoring sessions. The program will supply some alerts for that if teachers want to receive those.
Teachers will also just have the option of how much they want to engage with this and not. We don't want this to be an additional burden for teachers. We want this to be an additional support for kids because this is a different mode and model. Their kids are needing help at random times and in often need Spanish translation. And so this is really just meant to be supplemental. They're using it successfully in some very large districts in California, and we talked to them and asked, and kids are accessing it and using it. And again, what we heard back was teachers can engage as much or as little. Many teachers will suggest to kids, you need to call tutor.com tonight. You need to, our principals will monitor that data and say, I have some grade levels here that kids aren't accessing at all. So I'm going to follow up with some parents, but that's up to them. But the sites all have that option. We just want it really to be seen as the support that it is.
I can see where this could be really vital. I was fortunate enough to help Syste with translations of some of the at-risk conferences the last 3 days. And the majority of the issue that the students talk about is that sometimes there's not enough time in that office hour to get enough individual help, or during advisory, they're staying on, but aren't able to complete the actual essence of what they need help on. Even in class, some of them are saying, they don't speak up. They don't say enough in class so that maybe the teacher can redirect a mini lesson. And so they're still learning how to have to be confident in approaching the need for help. And, with students at risk, especially, they need support at all hours. We were doing evening conferences just to actually have the conversation with parents. And the parents also are looking for support, desperately looking for support, because these are 7th graders that we were holding the conferences with. And, one of Stassi's questions is, where were you in 6th grade? What kind of a student were you in 6th grade? And a lot of them are saying, well, I had 3s and 4s, and they know the difference between the grade change. But we were talking with each other thinking, what else can we do except have this computer open till 9 o'clock at night to help them? So it's going to be a huge support, I feel. I would be very, very interested to have ongoing, consistent reports on how this is going, especially at the different grade levels, because some grade levels are going to need this support a lot more, I believe, anyway, at this point in time.
I can provide this in the Friday memo.
Thank you. Just to see if they are moving with that kind of support too.
And it's truly in the spirit of the CARES funds that is specifically called out, right? To mitigate learning loss and to accelerate learning in direct support of students. So it's a great use of those funds for this in direct support of our kids right when we know they need it.
And I'll just add, this is, normally we would test drive something, but these are different times and going into the holidays, right? And I just think our staffs are working so hard, just what you described, Vita, to figure out a way to make a connection. And there's only so much time and there's so much you can do, and we've got to be able to think outside. And so kudos to Rob and his team for really contacting others that have accessed this as an additional support. And again, this isn't just for our students, it's for our families that are taking on so much more responsibility than they ever have. And so we brought this as a discussion item tonight because I wanted to be able to and it's going to connect to this next item that we're going to talk about, but in terms of bringing this just for a conversation and that shift of thinking. We didn't bring the contract for approval because we're learning on the fly. This is a build the plane as you fly it type of thing. But I just wanted to make you aware that as we learn, this may come back as a ratification, and I wanted to get it in front of you to get your perspectives, your concerns addressed before we roll it out. Because I'm not a big believer in let's just buy one other thing. Right. We got to use what we can, but because the times have changed so dramatically and I've had conversations. We had a big powwow with the high school district last week, and our high school kids, that asynchronous part is such a challenge. Right. And I can't help but think we have kids that are 6-7 months away from being in high school. Right. And how do we increase that trajectory? Because, especially you mentioned it, Vita, our junior high staffs are working so hard to connect with our kids, and the office hours were designed for, but I was a junior high guy for a long time. Getting kids to acknowledge that they need help is the biggest challenge. Right. So if we can figure out another way to make a connection with kids and get the data back so that we can initiate that conversation back with them for kids that are accessing the resource and experiencing success, maybe it'll turn that asynchronous time into some more viable outcomes for our kids.
Well, and the 7th and 8th graders too, they're dealing with 5 different teachers to have those sessions with rather than one
Amen.
teacher. So again, that's definitely a step towards high school, but a huge difference from the kids who are trying to access asynchronous information for the primary grades. So, and I know that, like you said, Luca, that the teachers, I think, are trying and working to provide as much of this individualized as they can. But to give another forum where they can get individualized attention, I think is really a big part. And I think I appreciate Rob too saying, because it was going to be a question, can they access the same tutor? Because if there's somebody who they register with and kind of gets them or understands where they're going with it, again, it's another chance to form a relationship there. So the notion that it's free to our families and stuff, is each account then, or is there going to be an account that's set up and then that's how we pay for it, or is there an institutional umbrella?
That's a Brian Rickey question in terms of uploading data, and I'm sure there's some type of, it's like a taxi cab, right?
Right.
Meter
like
runs.
Uber, because it's minutes, right?
Yeah, it's minutes.
The whole team's working on it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Usually we buy hours to begin with.
I just like the fact that the parents can be involved and hear if the child has questions, so they're understanding it as well. And it's, like you said, relieving some pressure off of our teachers, having them staying up to 11 at night because, they have their families and their children to help out themselves. But I looked into this and read it, and I'd like it.
I'd be very anxious to see the data about usage and, you know, the grade levels and even the subject areas.
Yeah.
Very anxious. Yeah.
I really want it to work because we need the support. So that's why
Are
we,
the right kids using it?
yeah, we need some successes right now, especially to support the kids and support the teachers, because the teachers are needing extra hands and extra voices to move through, especially at this time with conferences and looking at your at-risk list and your data that you're looking at in terms of where to go next. And you only have 3 weeks after you come back, and then you have a break, and then it's a song we've all sung before. But I hope, I really we need something as a district.
Maybe we don't.
Will you also then, Melissa, let us know, and Rob, about the teacher component of this, at least as far and as much as what they'll know about how it's going to go along and support them?
Yes, administrators and coaches will be trained, and then they'll turn around and explain it to teachers and how it'll work. And then at the same time, Tammy and her crew will be getting the word out to parents, because that's really our lever, is through the parent door. And I'm getting texts right now from principals going, "This is so good. This is what my parents want." So I know that this will be a welcome thing for our parents. That'll be the turnaround, but I'll keep you guys posted along the way. And on usage, of course.
Yeah, thank you. It's almost like I wish we had this last week so we could have told parents during this conference time, during the times when we were trying to figure out how to bridge them
We had
toward
to
more
really
learning. I get it.
due diligence to the research.
Yeah.
We don't ever want to
I
bring
understand.
it in.
I
And then we
understand.
had to make sure it communicated with our system. So Brian and team.
And that's why we're bringing it now, because I took just to come it back and say, I need you to approve this without knowing what it is.
Yeah.
Right. Because we are going to do that follow through. And I do anticipate that, you know, based on this conversation, that we'll bring back the agreement to be ratified so that we can get that, you know, that Christmas break is always such a challenge anyway. And if we can utilize that and connect some kids to really fill some, not just gaps, but for families to to give their kids something to keep them occupied as well, because, you know, that we always talked about Christmas break being such a time of, you know, disconnect, and kids had earned it. But now when we're talking about dogpiling that on the 8 months we've been in distance learning, right, it's just a more acute need.
And our usage data shows us that kids are on Clever on the weekends. They're not just playing, they're in their curriculum, in their work on the weekends. And so if we can leverage anything during that winter break, it's worth it for us, for our kids.
We'll go ahead and acknowledge.
Thank you to Rob and the presentation. Thank you for the information.
We'll go ahead and acknowledge the receipt of the overview of the contract with tutor.com to support students and families with asynchronous learning as presented. Thank you, team, again. And we'll move on to item C, COVID-19 status update, considerations for return to in-person instruction.
So this is a return to this topic. And as I prepared for this extensively over the last couple of days, I was inclined to think back to a comment that John made back in June when we were first looking at our reentry plan, right? And about how we needed to be flexible as we're going into this time frame. And that was never more true than over the last few weeks, because when I gave the update the last meeting in October, we were actually seeing a little bit of a downturn in the countywide rates and even the Santa Maria rates, which is part of the presentation today. And then over the weekend, I've developed these group of friends who work for her statisticians at Public Health, because I shared with you they've been downloading data that I'd been generating for the high school district in Orcutt and Guadalupe, and a little bit for folks over in the San Ynez Valley as well. Had set up a model that we've been using, and so I started getting these emails about tighten your belt, because we'd seen what happened around Halloween with that just the instance of those kids, the high school kids that were at parties, which is typical of high school kids around Halloween, was really just a microcosm of what we're seeing nationally and across the country. And so I based on the data that was released earlier this week, I really had to retool the whole tenor of this message. And so it made me think of what you said, John. We got to be flexible. And here we are at the height of flexibility, and having just looked at that tutor.com item and knowing that next week is Thanksgiving, I just got to say how thankful I am to, first of all of our parents for the additional responsibility they've taken on with educating their kids over the last 8 months. And I keep saying it, the last 8 months have been like 10 years. I got to thank all of our staff members that have linked together, our food service folks, that I think we're up to about 2 million meals served. We did a drive-through for Thanksgiving on Monday. Numbers of our sites are doing Thanksgiving distributions for families this week. Just so many great intentions aligning. And so I guess what I want to say to everybody who, here and on the screen, but across our system and across our community, let's give each other a little bit of grace in this time, because this is a challenge like one that we've never had before, and it's never been more challenging than how it's turned over the last, since the first of the month. And so I want to give you an update, because to John's point, we got to be flexible, and the commitment that you all made when we brought this item the first time back in September is we got to follow the data. Right, we can't just put an arbitrary date and say we're going to do this when, and I share that with the superintendents from across the county. When we first closed school back last spring, we can't just say we're going to be back by the 15th of May, because we don't know what's going to happen. And so the notion of where we are now in terms of these case rates across the country. New York City schools closed down today, right? They had been reopened and they're closed, and that's a big system, right? And they just, there's just so many moving parts. And so I want to say this before I start sharing the data. This is a public health issue, an international public health issue, more important than whether or not we're going to return students to our schools. We got to get our arms wrapped around this public health situation. And I say that to a room full of people wearing masks that I'm looking at. So thank you, right? Because that's what it's going to take. It's going to take everybody. We're stronger together. That's what that guidance that came out of public health back in July was titled. We've all got to do this together. But so I want to say to our folks in our system, our families, our kids, thanks for coming together with what we're doing so far, right? Is it what we all want? Is it what we would all desire? No way. But what we got to do is we got to come together and make sure that we're continuing to focus on moving the ball. And so that being said, I just want to talk a little bit again, this is like beating the drum. These statewide and countywide and local case rates, there has been a change in this, the state status on this blueprint for a safer economy, that identifies the rate of each county. When I shared the data with you previously, it had been released every Tuesday for the Friday of the week prior. So there was a 10-day lag between the date, the case positivity rate, and the average daily case rate, and the reporting date. What's happened because when I share you this data in a minute, because there is such an upturn, they've basically changed all those rules and said that tier assignments can occur any day of the week. Based on daily data, public health is going to take action. And that is the right public health response, right? The system was set up where you had to have been, if your status was on the down, going to a more restrictive tier, you had 2 weeks to, if you had if you were say in red and 1 week you were in purple, which is where San Diego and Sacramento were just last week. If you were able to mitigate and return to the red tier, you didn't move to that purple tier. Now public health just has said at any point in time, we're going to assign. And so that's what happened. We had, as of the reporting up through the through the 31st of October, which oddly enough was Halloween, right? And what's been reconfigured through the 10th, there were 13 counties that were in purple on the 31st. On that reporting date, it increased to 41 as of the 10th. And when I share with you the data, I mean, and we see it on the news. We're seeing this out of control, which has been predicted all along, but it's where we are. And so these are some of the new changes. Most recent data will be used to complete assessments and more localized data. So I'll share with you what the county website, how they've modified their data reporting as well. So again, this is the kind of the tiered system, that purple most restrictive tier. And I apologize, it's a little blurry. I cut and pasted this out of the presentation the Board of Supervisors made on Tuesday. If there's more than 7 average daily new cases per day in a county, is that purple tier. 4 to 7 is the red tier. This is the statewide reporting since the 24th. So on the 24th, statewide was purple, although there isn't a classification for the county. Statewide was 7.2 new average cases per day per 100,000 population, increased to 7.7 by the 31st. By the next week, the next 7-day cycle had increased to 8.4. But by the 10th, and this is where they modified this reporting. So now everything, instead of 7-day lag, the county is reporting 4 days, because we're finding there's too much happening in that 7-day cycle. So they're narrowing it down. But you see what happened between the date that ended on the 7th, and then that was from the 1st to the 7th was 8.4. From the 8th to the 10th, 16.5 new COVID cases per day per 100,000 across the state. For some counties in that reporting time, it's like 54 new cases a day. I mean, there are some counties that are just burning out of control. And this slide shows the map on the left is the map from the 10th, which actually was reporting back to that 31st date, because that was the 10-day lag from the 31st to the 10th. And then this map next to it is that was just released on Tuesday that accounts for up to the 10th. So you'll see that there were 13 states purple, or 13 counties purple, now 41.
What are the 2 counties on the right?
That's a great question. Melissa asked me that question yesterday. Mariposa and Alpine counties. Yeah, pretty remote, right? Not a lot of density, which is what we're seeing. And so that really does, it typifies the curve that we're under.
We could all move to Iceland. No cases.
Antarctica as well. I want to look just a minute. This is the new county community dashboard. Before it was a lot of tables, and I was sharing with you these spreadsheets where I was cutting and pasting data. The county has actually partnered with ESRI, which is a data firm that has created these graphic interfaces. So this is all the data that was in the table. This is the county-wide 3 different data points. New cases by episode date, which is that daily new case. That 7-day averaging, which is the red line that runs through there. And then the new cases by the report date, which is interesting. See if I can get this to work. So today, the 18th, I don't know if you can see that little down the bottom, it says 1118 on your screen. There were 91 new cases reported in the county today. And you see that is about equivalent to where we were back in July. You see that graph goes all the way back to August. 91 new cases. Now those weren't all from today. They'll be distributed back upon when they do the contact tracing that it was actually contracted on a specific date. So the date, what they've determined is that on the 14th, which was 4 days ago from today, there were 28 new cases in Santa Barbara County on that date in the county. On November 9th, 56 new cases across the county. So out of this green line that hangs over here, you see there's a gap. There are still cases that haven't been assigned to a date yet. So this is more of a recalculated average on an ongoing basis, as opposed to we were getting that 1 week at a time. And this goes back to that point of state's going to say, based on what's happening, we're going to take action right now. And so it really does change some of the rules. What they've also done is taken the data by community. And so in this file here, I have just isolated to the city of Santa Maria. There are 10 different census codes in the county. This is the data that I had been calculating by cutting and pasting into a spreadsheet previously. This is today's reporting. So back to the 14th, which was Saturday, the average new daily case rate in Santa Maria is up to 11.3. And again, 7 gets you to the purple tier. We were up to a little over 12 as of the 11th, which was a week ago today. Yeah, yep, it's all, and what we saw, the governor did a press conference on Tuesday to kind of roll out the new criteria. Between November 1st and November 7th, there was a 53% increase in cases, which was the biggest 1 week period that we'd had since back in June. So we kind of made this big horseshoe, right? We worked so hard wearing the masks, washing the hands, doing the social distancing, trying to do, follow all the things, and just this spread so rapidly that one instance just creates this spike, and we're in it. And so that's kind of the community piece. So I'll share this with you. You're able to get on and see all those things now. Now I get the superintendents from the other district. Now that they can see this, they call me and they say, "Man, you were so slow before." That's because I have more lead than eraser in most of my pencils, and so it takes me a little while longer. So then again, going back to the 26th, which is when the week ending September 26th was really the first cycle of the new calculated system. This is where we've been. And from a graphic standpoint, again, you see that for where this red line is the city of Santa Maria, you see that big horseshoe. So we're almost back where we started. And so that being said, I'm so grateful for everybody wearing a mask. I'm so grateful for all of our employees and our families following those protocols, because there are places across the state and across the country where it's way worse. And so this is the power of folks sticking with the safety protocols, right? If we all commit to it, we can all get through this at some level. It's just, back to John's point, got to be flexible and adaptable, right? As the conditions change, we got to change our angle. And so that's from a data standpoint, that's kind of where we are. So this is, this data point right here I'm pointing is where we were at the last board meeting. We'd actually gone down to below the county average, 5.02. And so we had been in purple through the 10th of October, and we were in red for a week. And under those old rules, you had to be in red for 2 weeks to move to red, pop back up, pop down, and now we're back on this runaway curve. So, so in terms of what does that mean for us, it doesn't change what our focus is, right? Thus the item tonight on the tutoring piece, right? How can we better support this wonderful effort that all our folks are making to support our students and our families? And so that's something that we got to consider. The big issue is this issue of surveillance testing. And so I want to thank some people right up front. First of all, Matt Beecher and his team have been working with Quest Labs on getting this surveillance testing protocol up for us. It's been a big challenge, and the county, and it comes out of the reopening guides that the state put out. You know, how should schools think about testing? Once schools are reopened to at least some in-person instruction, that's off for us. It's recommended surveillance testing be implemented based on the local disease trends. We're going to go ahead with that surveillance testing. It's better for our community. It's peace of mind for our folks. It's not a preventative thing, but it allows us as such a big organization, if and when someone gets a positive test, we're going to be able to start contact tracing and minimize that impact, right? And so I want to thank Matt for the work he's done in getting this rolling with Quest Labs, and all of you in that first, and I'll talk a little bit more about how the cohorts will roll out, have been notified. I signed up. Can't wait to get my test kit. But I also want to thank Matt Harris, who's the president of CSEA, and Jose Segura, who's the president of SMEA. We've been sending out communications together to employees, making them aware this is coming, because it's the right thing to do for all of us and for our community. And so I thank them for their support in this effort. I meet with them twice weekly. They both had, we met yesterday morning. We kind of talked about questions that they got from folks. I told them I'm going to bring this to the board tonight. We got another communication that I've drafted based on feedback tonight that we'll send out again, just to provide that reassurance, because it is the right and necessary thing to do. In terms of what it looks like, this is the recommendation from the state public health. School districts and schools shall test staff periodically as capacity permits and as practicable. And this is what, and again, I give Matt credit. He talked to a lot of these different testing entities out there. And Quest is the one that was able to manage an organization of our size to do it from home. Folks that are working from home be able to mail their results from home. If folks that are working at their sites, we're going to have drop boxes where they can bring the kits in so that we can get them back and we can get that cycle going. And so I'm going to give a little update on what that means. And so I'm going to tell Matt to feel free to jump in at any point to correct or clarify me on any of the points we make, but I just wanted to kind of run through these pieces real quickly, but I'll pause after each one. So we currently have employees enrolling in the Quest Labs at-home testing system. Mrs. Cordero mentioned earlier today, she got her email and registered. It's all in your SMBSD email somewhere.
All the information you need is right in there.
Yep, and again, thanks to Matt and Jose. Matt Beecher previewed that email with him. They gave him feedback, and so we sent out that email to let folks know that was coming, and they were very helpful in making sure that it was clear. Cohort 1 is about 750 employees that are currently enrolling. Test kits will be delivered. When I enrolled yesterday, it said the kit should be at my home within 3 to 5 days, and so I'm expecting it'll be there, and I'll drop it in the mail. And it goes to the home address. Gets returned via FedEx, and the results are reported in that interface, that app, back to the employee. Positive test results are reported to our liaison to public health department. And knowing that we have folks that live in other counties, we have a number of employees live in San Luis County, be reported to San Luis County, and our liaison, who is Sean Chenoweth, who's our risk management supervisor, is that point of contact to make sure that we're coordinating with public health to initiate the appropriate contact tracing. We get monitor the submission of test kits back from Quest to know that everybody has completed their cycle within the cohort, because we are obligated to test everyone. So we will follow up. We'll make test kits available if folks get cross in the mail or something happens, so that we keep the cycle going, because we don't want to break this chain. And then most importantly, especially now with the holidays going up, with the public health order that was released last night, to make sure that we're being current on all the health and safety protocols, the physical distancing, the hand washing, the masking with continued vigilance. The Santa Barbara County protocol that was released last night was no gatherings outside of households. That's a trip for Thanksgiving, right? To think about not bringing in other households into our households. You know, the restrictions are going to, you know, we're back to that level. So it's going to take some redoubling of effort to get through. So that's the piece on the surveillance testing. Matt, did I miss anything important, critical?
No, you covered it. Thank you. Nice job.
No, that's a credit to you because you've learned me up real good. Thank you. And so then the next piece becomes, because we're back to this purple tier, is I want to give you an update on where we are with this small cohort groups. Because we, you know, again, the state reopening guideline was, it's expected that districts will bring back their highest need students. This tutoring, this tutor.com is a nice opportunity to outreach to those grades, all kids in grades 4 through 8. But we do have students with greater need. So we have, since the last meeting, have been working forward on that cohort 1, which is that moderate to severe and TLP SDC classes. We're in phase 1 right now, and I want to give credit to Rusty Gordon and Barbara Mendez and the program specialists, Christy Callahan and Megan Fargen and Julie. Why am I blanking on Julie's last name?
Julie Hansen.
That have really been doing a lot of the work, reaching out, and all of this, the staff and special services, reaching out to families, because our families have concerns about, you know, sending their kids back in this environment we're in, and so that constant communication has been important. But most importantly, is we're getting this COVID testing up for our folks as well. So that we know walking in that we're providing as much of that support as we can. Phase 2 is really initiating these stakeholder meetings, beginning the conversations with teachers. And again, Jose, I give credit to Jose. He reached out to the SDC teachers after the last board meeting to get their questions, because we sent a communication out. I did the same thing with principals. We combined those concerns and questions and cycle them back to that group that they're putting into the reopening plan, with the idea, and again, this is not time laden. This is based on what we're seeing in terms of the public health conditions, right? With the idea that those students will be those that will bring back our group 1 cohort. So what we've been doing in the meantime is thinking about what would that next phase look like. And it's a little more challenging, because when we're talking about students in SDC classes, those are self-contained classes, right? There's you know, and although the needs vary for students, they're within a range that can be addressed in a setting. But even though some parents are not going to feel comfortable having their kids come back. So we're going to need to maintain that distance learning portion with those students as well. So that's why it's critical to make sure that we're collecting all this information up front. It's a different challenge when we look at our next groups of consideration for subsequent cohorts, because we've talked about newcomers, right? We've talked about our foster youth, our homeless students. But what we don't want to do is take away from what's happening with them right now. And even if we just consider newcomers, if the 5 of us were the 5th grade team at a school, we would each have some newcomers. So what would that bringing back look like? So again, back to John's point of being flexible about the plan, we've been going back and looking at the plan and saying, what is the most effective way of doing that? And it is likely in some of this asynchronous time, because we don't want to negate students that opportunity to get that synchronous, that connection, that daily interaction. Although we know it's not what we want it to be, it's better than nothing. I was thinking about it, it's like we're on the opposite banks of a river that's just raging, and we can see each other and we can wave and we're on dry ground, but it's just not safe to cross at this point. You know, and that flow was downsized a little bit. Now it's roaring again. So how do we redouble those efforts? And so I'm going to ask Melissa to jump in because she's really been working with Rusty and that team and really consideration of what some of those designs might look like. The instructional services team has really been looking, what are other districts doing to address the same, because, you know, regardless of geography, the needs of our kids fall into some pretty similar dynamics. And so just looking at what some of those possibilities may be. So Melissa, if you want to join in.
Sure. So just to kind of complete the picture of where we're at with our SPED classes, even though we've moved back to purple, even though we don't know the timeline, we're still trying to play out what it would look like. So the next step on there is we're trying to figure out busing. What does busing look like? Many of our kids have busing written into their IEPs. Some of our parents have said, that's okay, I'll bring my kid myself, but others have said, I will need transportation. So that's at the stage we're at now, is what would that look like? Like, what does that look like in this world? So that's where the team's at, Rusty and team. We just met on that today. That'll be the next steps there. The next group that we think about really is around our newcomers. We've definitely heard from parents and teachers. That's a group that's really struggling in distance learning and really needs some additional supports. We have about 333 students that would be considered newcomers in our system. But to Luke's point, when you think about a self-contained classroom, we can bring back a self-contained classroom. I'm a teacher, I'm with my kids, they come back in person and I'm teaching. They're not missing anything. But when you think about over 300 newcomers across our entire system, if you were to bring them back in the morning, they would miss their synchronous learning time with their teacher. We don't want that. And so some of the things that we're seeing other districts doing are bringing the newcomers back in groupings by need, by their level, and then they're being supported in the afternoons during that asynchronous time at the school site. So they're still getting one-on-one, but they get their synchronous time in the morning, and then they get that support that they need in the afternoon. Who's doing that, what time, all that stuff, that's all the next steps in the work that we're doing. We don't know those answers yet, but that's the next steps. The other group that then would follow suit after that is our foster youth. And then in priority area, it would be our foster youth that are in hotels, cars, group homes. What many folks are doing with foster youth, it's a different need. That they're bringing them into the school sites during synchronous time, so typically in the morning, but they're just bringing them in so that we can make sure that they're getting good breakfast. We can make sure they're getting good lunch. We can make sure that they have every single possible supply that they need there. They have good headphones on, and that they're able to do their synchronous learning with their class in a really safe, quiet space that's conducive to learning. And we're seeing that model done up and down the state, especially in the larger districts. They started with that because there is a large need in those very impacted large districts. And so we're learning from that model as well. So when we think about future cohorts, none of them look the same, right? The three things that I've described are three different types of bringing back small group cohorts for different reasons. They need different supports, and how we go about doing it will look different. So those are really the next steps in thinking about what would those cohorts look like, how would we do that design, and what would those models look like on our campuses for our kiddos.
Thanks, Melissa. So questions, concerns, considerations, prognostications.
Yeah, the one thing I think about when I see the cohort one group that may or may not be at some point coming back, or even any other groups for that matter, is, you know, one of the concerns raised by parents is comorbidities that either they or their child or someone in their family is dealing with. And so I'm wondering if there are comorbidities for some of those students that preclude us from having them in the cohort, just from a safety standpoint, because I'm sure the parents are going to want their kids to participate, but it would be kind of a little bit akin, just a little bit, to say office where somebody wants to come in and get their physical therapy, but either they have a comorbidity or another disease process that makes that not safe, and we have to not allow them to come in, or they're in one of those other categories that might be at risk. So I'm just wondering, if we're kind of prepared to kind of see where that line needs to be through public health or whatever.
Yeah, well, and to your point, that's been a valuable part of starting with our most severe special needs population. A lot of our kids are medically fragile.
Right.
And
that's
so,
why I asked the question, sure.
and that's, and that's why we've been utilizing our program specialists really know our kids, know families. Juan Uribe in special services probably knows our parents as well as anyone. We've been having those conversations, and all that information has been logged. And what you just described, John, is probably parents are really concerned about. They're saying, yeah, I'm not comfortable with having my child come back. So in that target population, we haven't really come across that yet, but it has definitely risen to the, into the factoring of ensuring that we're, again, making public health the number one priority with everything that we do.
And in our reentry plan, we've outlined what those processes and procedures would look like in the heart of the plan in the beginning, but really in detail in the attestation piece that Matt and his shop put together, and Sean. Now, do those need updates? Do new things come up every day that we haven't thought of? 100%. But we do have a lot of health and safety guidelines that we're leaning on around what that looks like with the small group cohorts, because exactly what you asked, board member, or what teachers are asking and what parents are asking are the what ifs. What if this happens? What if this happens? And there are processes and procedures in place. And it's also what we're learning from districts who are already doing the cohorts, because there's things that no one's thought about yet until you're actually doing it and things come up.
Yeah, and I think from a legality standpoint, in the past, much of the onus has been, or at least the rights have been within the families and the parents to have their kids have access and equitable access to things. But at the same time now, the side of legality errs on safety and public health. And that's pretty well established. So I know that's going to be a really fine line to try and draw where our rights come in to protect public health. But we just need to be really on top of that, I think. There's a Bichon Brisset there with the glasses. I think. Is that my house? Oh no, that's Rob Bergen. I like Lori's picture better. I'm sorry, Rob.
Thank you.
I do too.
All right, if there's no more discussion, then I'll acknowledge receipt of the COVID-19 update as presented. Thank you guys so much. I know that's really, you are nimble. You're not just flexible, you're nimble. You're all over the place. Great job, thank you. And so I just come to this. Board reports, superintendent. Anybody? Bueller? Okay.
Everybody be safe.
Yeah. And
Giving, be thankful to each other.
And that's a great point, Mr. Laura. I think that kind of goes to what we were just talking about. We're coming upon vacations that traditionally have posed other concerns or considerations, and so I know, that's another kind of really subjects that's going to be very difficult or hard to broach is trying to really encourage our families to be safe and local or what have you, not touch on too many touchstones during those long breaks, and really continue to be patient and thoughtful about those things. And I'm not sure, how we can do any more about that than any of the public service announcements and those things that are going on, or the things that are in the media. But I think that will definitely be something to see, especially after what we've seen that has been just after Halloween. We'll see where things go after the next two, because we know that there's a lot of pressure to travel or to see families. So I hear good things. I really do, and I'm not just saying that. When I do talk to folks who are on the campuses, I hear good things. I hear good things from the teachers as far as them continuing to get acclimated, continuing to do good things with their kids, and really starting to have some positive interactions, or continuing to have positive interactions, and learning's happening. And that's always the really good thing to hear, is that learning's happening. So I think we'll all be interested to hear in the NWEA results and see how that really kind of feeds into continuing to adapt and change and progress. Good stuff. Thank you all, both teachers that are still watching.
I just want to thank Melissa and her whole team, Nicole, Lori, AJ, Rob, and his whole team on really researching, what are some of those things that we need to do to make what you just described actionable, John, because it is, this is brand new to everyone. I do want to share that one of the things that we began doing over the last few weeks, I shared this with Linda before the meeting tonight. On Friday afternoons, I've been holding the TGIF. Sounds pretty exciting, right? When you can't do anything. But what we've been doing is inviting our whole leadership team in just to share something that they did during the week. And we put it in this spreadsheet called Top This. And principals, assistant principals, coordinators have been putting in lessons that kids have done for their class, or things they're doing with their team. And a lot of them are videos. One of them was in Rob's presentation, was a little girl who did this math lesson from, I want to say she was from Fairlawn last week, who was just the most animated kid I've ever seen in my life on the screen, right? Teaching how to do,
Teach Back Tuesday.
three-digit addition, right? With regrouping. Teach Back?
It's called Teach Back Tuesday. Teachers learned it through Doug Fisher, and a ton of them are using it, and it's really awesome to see. It's cool. Kids teach back to the teacher and other kids what they learned.
And so to your point, John, there's some phenomenal things that are happening. And so I'll link a couple of those just as a teaser into the Friday update this week, so you get to share in some of that fun.
I was able to get in to the one about the young lady that was encouraging everyone to vote.
Yes.
The other one I couldn't access.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think it's me. I'm overstimulated with all this. Crazy.
I'm getting braver about just clicking around.
Yeah, I've reactivated my MySpace account.
Oh my God.
If there was dust on the internet, that would have shaken it all. Start calling that interdust. There you go. All
Closed session.
Yeah. If there's no more board comments, we'll close open session and return to closed session to discuss